Um, so this last session that we are going to cover is talking about what do I do now that I've built relationships, I've triaged the trauma, I've built that bond and trust with my student. So now comes the academic. And so the focus for today is going to be me sharing things that I have tried, things that I found that have worked and that have not worked for me in my classroom, and just how do you close the gap? What do you do when you have children that are coming to you fourth, fifth grade, 12th grade, and they can't read and they can't write in Spanish or in their native language? And so the resources and the ideas that I'm going to share are for Spanish. So I know there are some districts that have other languages. And so I'm sorry that I don't have any resources for that, but I would still love to chat with you and try to help you and kind of build your program up. So, okay, so starting with what do I do once I realize that my student or students cannot read or write? They can't write their name. And so I do have one this year in fourth grade. Last year, I had a class of about 12 out of 20 who couldn't read, who couldn't write in their native language. And so what do? How do you build them up? We have the STAR test going, where do I start? So for me, what I started to do was teaching them. You have to teach them the letter sounds and the letter names in Spanish. And so I know districts have there's many different programs. I've used different resources, but what I have found that has been engaging, it's quick, and I've seen that the students can memorize is called Estrellitas. So Estrellitas is a program that we used in my district. It's been not taken away, but there's other versions of resources. And like I said, the resources that you have on your district, if they're working for you, go for it. I had to go talk to pre-K and kinder teachers my first year because I didn't know what to do when I started receiving kids that couldn't read or write. So one teacher shared Estrellitas with me and I fell in love with it. So Estrellitas is gestures. So the students learn by movements. You can find the videos on YouTube. And so that is the picture that I took when I just searched Estrellitas in YouTube. This lady pops up and I've been using her video for about 5 years now to help me teach kids their letter sounds and letter names in Spanish. And there's also a chart. You can see the chart. Some districts that do have the Estrellita kit, it will come with the chart, books, tracing books, and then building them up by syllables. So I love Estrellitas. One example of the gestures, and I'll just do a couple of letters that I did with my student today. It's movement. So like they start with the letter O. And so you teach them, this is the O that you're going to make. And she says, oso, oso, o. And it's that simple. And it's a constant repetition. And then each letter has its own gesture. So like for avión, 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 a, iman, iman, e. And so as the kids are learning each gesture and each sound, they start memorizing it and they have fun because they're getting to move around. Whereas I've seen some resources, some products where it's just a book and you're just repeating and the kids just sitting there and they're trying to memorize, but it's hard. And the best thing that I like about Estrellitas are the movements. And so I do not teach all the letters in one session. So I chunked it by 5 to 6 letters a day and then a final review. But if I see that my students are not getting it, then I for sure slow down. But if I have a group that, they mastered it, we're ready to move on, then I include more letters. Another resource that I used is also through YouTube, and he is called El Monosílabo. And once the students have mastered, they have to master letter sound and letter name, then they start focusing on building the syllables. So for example, mame, mi, momu, pape, pipopu, and this monosyllable, he has a channel and he breaks up his videos by the syllables. So there's one video for mame, mi, momu. There's one video for pape, pipopu. There's one video for sase, si, so, su. So it's broken down, and I like to use monosyllable. When I had last year that large amount of students that couldn't read or write, it was a whole group. I was doing whole group lessons with estrellitas and monosyllable. But this year, because I have fewer, I'm doing this at stations. And part of that is I'm using a little bit of my NAC curriculum to teach the student, because there's no point in trying to build him up in English when his Spanish has such a big gap. So once we do estrellitas and monosyllable, I start giving tracing books, sheets, there's syllable practice, copying from a book. So you're trying to build up their skills as quickly as possible, but understanding that you will have kids that will take off. Some kids will memorize it and they will be ready for building syllables. And you have some students that are still stuck on sounds. So with all that, that's where I start taking notes and making notes of, this is what I'm doing. This is how many weeks I've been doing this. This student is getting it. The student is not, because that's going to be my evidence to take to my meetings if I have concerns about certain students. So one great practice that I like to use in stations is copying from a book. I feel copying from a book has tremendous benefits, and Dr. Walachowski is going to talk to you guys about that.
Yes, one of my favorite strategies is this book called The Sincerest Form. And this strategy is something that's used with actual writers. And I love this strategy. I've used it in the classroom there at the university when we're teaching the unit on writing. And so I will ask the students, give them a simple assignment of create a children's book and articulate the story, think it out, flesh it out, write it out, and they do that. So I'll give them time to do that. And then I bring in several children's books and I ask them, grab a handful of children's books, and I want you to spend some time reading those books, thinking about them. And they do that. And I don't tell them where we're going with this. And then I tell them, now put those books away, revisit your story, and based on your inspirations from looking at the work of other authors, rework your story. And once they do that, I go around the room and ask them what changed. And it's just fantastic where students will say things like, well, my dialogue became much rich. I realized that my story was very flat, or I used different ways to transition, or I gave my characters more life. And before they didn't really have that with the story. And so there was no direct instruction. So everything was indirect instruction, but they got the message and the gist of this. And then I segue into teaching them, like, this is a strategy that you can use with students actually at any level, like I'm showing you here. It could be from a very nascent student in terms of his writing proficiency all the way to a published author. And this strategy is called copying, so sincerest form. So I do explain the difference between plagiarism and doing this strategy. And you literally get a book and by hand, because that's better for the brain, write word for word, the punctuation, the word, the correct spelling, the grammar, all of those things, write them down on a piece of paper. And then you're able to put that piece of paper and then write your own story or begin your own story and then do that strategy of drafting from another book and then putting that away or even keeping it there. How is it informing your writing and what is changing? And then the critical piece is analyzing and articulating. Why did I change this? How did that inspire me to create better dialogue? How did it inspire me to compose better sentences or transition words, etc.? So it's a fantastic strategy, I think, that you can use with any writer. And I don't know of any other strategies that impact and correlate into great writing, like right from the start. So I wanted to make sure that I shared that with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Walachowski. And I have used a version of this in my classroom. I've used it with my first graders, and I definitely use it with my new arrival students because it does show them a model, an example of rich text. It's authentic, and it teaches them like the format, because many of them don't know how to read or write. And so this is a great practice for them. So I have used this in my stations, and this year I do have it in my stations. Okay, so other resources that I have used is fluency practice. So I have used fluency practice since I was a first grade teacher. And when I was a first grade teacher, I did an experiment because I wanted to see which resource would help students grow quicker and in comprehension with their fluency. And so I did repeated reading, which is where you take a fluency passage, and the students, you can either have them read for 1 minute, and so they're trying to read whatever, however many words in 1 minute, or you can have them read the entire passage and then you time them as an overall. And so it's kind of like a running record. You want them to read with fluency, but also with accuracy. And so the photos that you guys are seeing, I have a resource where I have fluency as basic as the syllables. And so they're random syllables broken up. And for my students that are starting, that's where they start getting their first fluency practice. The other resource is repeated reading. So repeated reading is with, Reader's Theater. The other part is Reader's Theater. So Reader's Theater is a great tool because the students are acting out a play and they're following the dialogue. And so I would give my students the script. And so we would practice that script for the entire week. So at the beginning, they stumbled through it. I was teaching them about stage directions and making sure that, they only read their part and, reading with feeling. And so that was one piece. But then as we moved on, by Friday, they were much faster. They were animated. They were reading with feeling. And so when I did this experiment, for me and my students, I found that repeated reading had a little bit greater impact, a greater impact on their fluency. I saw that my students, they were reading, at this time, and their fluency was improving and it was quicker. So I encourage you guys to work on fluency practice. It's great for every single grade level, not just for new arrivals, but for everybody. And Reader's Theater, I don't want to, dismiss Reader's Theater, because I do feel it is a great tool. It gives the kids a chance to interact, and work together as a team and just play and have fun. Okay, so test-taking strategies. I wanted to include test-taking strategies because I know that, we can't dismiss the STAR test, and we can't dismiss our new arrivals from taking exams, because I understand they have to take them. So I wanted to share just some tips that I do while I am trying to prepare my new arrival students for taking the test. In Bryan ISD, we have Schoology. And Schoology is kind of like Google Classroom, where I can put questions, I can put the text, and my students have to type. They have to type out their answers. And so that is one example of a text that we were reading. And so I pose the question. I make sure that they understand, the question. I have them write it out on a piece of paper. They write out their answer on a piece of paper, and then they reread it to make sure that, they completed the question, and then I have them type it. So Schoology allows them to practice typing, because that's the way that they will be tested on the STAR test. Another thing that I do is I teach my students the type of question. So the test items that they will see on the STAR test. So last year, the test changed and for reading. And so my students had no idea about the drag and drop, the ECR, the SCR, part A, part B, choose two answers, all of the online tools. So it was a huge learning curve last year. And so I started making sample questions in Eduphoria. So that's our test-based form that we used in the district. And so that allows us to create teacher tests. So I started making teacher tests. I started trying to do examples in Schoology, just something to where the kids can practice. Because especially our new arrivals, imagine, we go to a new country and they say, here's this test and good luck. And so imagine the anxiety that our students are feeling. I remember one year, I had a girl cry because she wasn't sure how to use the tools because I had not taught her yet. So from that experience, I learned every single year, I have to teach my students the tools. I have to teach them if there's a highlighter on the screen, how to use the highlighter. If there's a button to take away an answer choice, I have to teach that. I have to teach them when you click on this button, you are marking your answer for that question. And then especially with the change from last year, I had to teach my students, how do I know what's an ECR? Well, you're going to see these bullets. How do I know it's the SCR? Well, you're going to see this type of style. When you see part A, make sure you find part B because you have to answer. You have to pick an answer for each one. So everything that my students were tested on, they were taught prior to that. And it took a lot of practice. I wasn't able to do just one example or even two examples. We did multiple examples throughout the whole year. And when we would do stamina days, I made sure everything was set up the way that they were going to see it. It did take a lot of work on my end. I'm not going to lie. I had to play with the system. But once they took the STAR test, they knew how to use the tools. I was walking around and I saw them, using the dictionary on the computer. I saw them using the highlighter. I saw them using the option where they could dismiss an answer. So you need to start thinking about those things. I know it's barely September, but start thinking about them now because the tests don't stop. Unfortunately, there's no exemption for our students. And so they need to practice the way that they will be tested. So those are some examples that I did. I created these and I put them in our test forum that we use in the district. Okay, so besides test taking, I love to do read alouds, and research shows that the more that you read to students, the better readers they become, the more engaged they are. And so I like to choose mentor texts that my students can relate to. When I first started in the New Arrival Center 7 years ago, I was using traditional text. I was using authentic text. But then I started to notice that the characters didn't look like my students. The families in the books didn't look like my students. So I made it a point to try to find books that my students could relate to. And as the years have gone by, I am just so excited and amazed at how much authentic bilingual books and stories that have been created and written for our new arrival students. And so I wanted to highlight these books in particular because they are just powerful stories about immigrants. It shares their stories of crossing the border. It shares their stories of having to leave somebody behind, leaving their things behind, the sacrifices. So La Frontera and the book Sometimes. Those are books about the children crossing over and coming to Texas. And the book Sometimes is available in Spanish, and it was written by Dr. Hugo Ibarra and John Seidlitz. So those books I love to share with my students. And I also have, whenever we celebrate Dr. Seuss Week, I have Dr. Ibarra come into my class and meet my students, and he kind of shares, about his book, and then he reads his book. This year, I discovered the Mexiglish girl, La Chica Mexiglish, and it is a beautiful story of a girl who is half Mexican, and she's half, well, her father is from the UK and her mother's from Mexico. So, and then she goes to visit her family in Mexico, and she has a hard time. So that book was really great. My students enjoyed it a lot. Soñadores is another fabulous book. This book talks about a mother and her child coming to the United States. Our kids can relate to that because many of them come with only one parent, or maybe they come with somebody else who's not the mother or the father. And then the other books that I love to read is Nuestra clase es una familia, and on the last day, Una carta de tu maestra. So those books are great books in Spanish to start the year and to end the year. And so another book that I use is ¿Qué cosas dice mi abuela? Because as our students are coming in, I notice that they have a little bit of trouble remembering to say please, to say thank you, to say excuse me. So all of that, when we talked about in session 1, the expectations, teaching, session 2, teaching your routines and your procedures. I love to use this book because it has dichos. They're sayings in Spanish. And so as we read the book, at the end of the book, I have my students choose one dicho, one phrase, and they have to analyze it. They have to analyze what does it mean, and then draw a picture, and then they have to present that. So these books are just a few examples of authentic mentor texts that our kids can relate to. So reading one-to-one with your students. So what I've discovered in my years in the NAC classroom is that many of our new arrival students have never been read to at home. And I discovered that probably my second year in the new arrival center. And I was stunned. I was stunned because I remember my mom reading to me every single night. I remember picking out my book. I remember getting into bed, and those are experiences that a lot of our new arrival students don't have. And I wanted to bring that up because that's sometimes something that we take for granted. We assume that they've been read to. We assume that they have books at home. And so in my classroom, I am very, very fortunate to have an assistant, and I always apply for resident student teachers because those are the people that I rely on to help me with reading one-to-one. Every single day, we have assigned kids, and we are reading one-to-one with those kids. Because for one, you're bonding with them. For two, if they can't read, you are reading to them. They're listening to how a person is, supposed to read, what reading sounds like, and they're able to enjoy the story. So it's a no pressure time for them because, the whole day they're trying to figure out, how do I write my name? What does this mean? I don't know what this says. But when they're listening to a story, it's a one-to-one bonding time. And I know that not every classroom is able to do that. But if you have a chance, if you can find a way in your schedule to just, assign yourself a few kids each day, every week, that is going to make a huge impact because your students are listening to somebody read versus not having anybody at all. One thing I wanted to talk about is, what you're talking about all these things and boom, you get a new student. And so that does happen often. Last year, I started with 8 students and I quickly grew to 20. The year before that, I started with 12 and I grew to 29. So what do you do? What do you do? You know, we're implementing all these things, my curriculum, I'm trying to go through my curriculum, and I'm getting students, you know, twice a week, every 2 weeks, once a month. What do you do? And so my advice and in my experiences, you have to start. You have to start from the beginning. And I know that sounds, you know, kind of crazy because you've invested all this time, you know, your classroom is rocking and rolling and kids are starting to make growth. And then you start getting students and your classroom is changing. What I like to do is I use my new arrival students to be the example. They are the leaders. They are showing our new friends, this is where we put our stuff. This is how we go to the bathroom. This is where we go to get our food. And so they become the leaders. They are the leaders. They are showing our new friends. And then the academic comes. I always like to do a quick test. I will just grab a book and see if the child can read and if the child can write. And if they can't, then I have to start all over again. You know, it may be one child that I'm doing the estrellitas with, while my other students who were doing estrellitas are doing something else. So I know that can be overwhelming, especially because we don't have time. Time is something that we don't have. We're trying to get through the curriculum, and our students are coming at different times of the school year. And so my advice for that is you can't leave them behind. You can't forget about them, or you know, you can't say, okay, I'm going to dedicate this much time and then move on. As the students are coming, they need their dedicated time, especially if they can't read. So the ones that, now you will have some that come in that they can read, they can write, and they're ready just to, you know, acclimate with the class and keep on chugging, keep on going through the curriculum. But the ones that come in not being able to read and write, you have to stop. You have to stop and build them up so that way they can function with the rest of your class. So one resource that I wanted to share is a reading log. So last year, once I saw my results and I saw that, you know, my kids were having a hard time with reading, I started doing a daily reading log. And so I was asking my parents and students to read something at home for 20 minutes every single day. Now, so you might be asking, well, you know, you have kids that can't read, you have kids that can't write. I was sending home syllable homework. And so that would be their reading. You know, I would require my non-readers to either practice their letters, sounds and names, or practice their fluency of the mame mi momu, pape pipopu. And so every single day, the parent had to sign off on this. And I made that part of a contract where I explained my expectations, I explained the process, and each parent signed off on it. And so if for whatever reason the parent forgot to sign or the child just forgot to read, then they would have to read 30 minutes at recess. So they were taking their books outside and I was listening to them read for their 30 minutes. And so as they started, you know, realizing that I don't have a choice, I'm either going to read at home for 20 minutes or I'm going to read with Ms. Barrera for 30 minutes during my recess time. I started having way more or less students having to sacrifice their recess to do that homework. And I wanted to share these flyers that our school made. We always pass them out for open house, which for us is coming up on Thursday. I like to send these home because parents don't sometimes realize how much 20 minutes versus 1 minute. And so if you look at the 1 minute, a child who reads 1 minute per day is only exposed to 8,000 words per year, versus a child who reads 20 minutes per day is exposed to 1.8 million words per year. And so I put these on cardstock and I send them home to the parents that can't make it, but I pass them out for open house. And I explain that to the students. I explain it to the students. You know, we look at, you know, the numbers, and they themselves are surprised at how many words they can be exposed to if they just read every single day for 20 minutes. And I have a lot of them ask me, "Pero maestra, teacher, what about Saturday and Sunday?" Saturday and Sunday is also included in the week. So, you know, you have students that will read on the weekends and you have some that don't. But for the most part, they do see the benefit of, you know, reading for 7 days a week. Okay, so as a recap for students that come, when students are coming throughout the year, like I mentioned, I have my new arrivals that are teaching them. They are the leaders. This is powerful for them because they're taking, you know, ownership of teaching our new kids, you know, where's the bathroom? How do I use the bathroom? This is recess. How do I play at recess? This is the cafeteria. You know, how do I enter my number to get food? I also like to talk one-to-one with new students the first day that they come. I like to ask them, you know, who they came with. I find out, you know, how did they get here? And the reason I ask that is because so that way I can kind of diagnose what kind of trauma. Are they coming with trauma? Did they have a traumatic experience? And then the third thing that I look at is I grab a book and I try to measure, can they read it? Can they read it? Can they write their name? And then as we are traveling around the building, I introduce the new students to our key players. So that is something that I don't stop doing. As I'm getting new kids throughout the school year, I am introducing them to those key players that are in the school. I am showing them, you know, this is Miss So-and-so in the front office. This is Miss So-and-so in the library. If you get lost, you know, she will help you. This is Miss So-and-so who gives us our food. And so all those key players are introduced, you know, each time that I get a new student. So just some things to consider. I had a few questions that were asked about differentiation. So how do you differentiate, you know, in your NAT classroom? Because in my NAT classroom, there are, you know, pre-K level all the way up to 5th grade level in my classroom right now. So what do you do? What do you do to try to build everybody up? And so I try to find their strengths and I highlight them. So as I'm teaching my curriculum for reading or writing, I'm calling on students to read out loud. I'm asking scaffolding questions to try to build up the ones that may not understand the story. I'm using, you know, buddy reading to help each other read to the ones that cannot read. If we do a worksheet activity, I will have my assistant, my resident teacher, myself try to sit with those kids that might struggle. But I know not everybody in the district will have that benefit. So, you know, I encourage you to use the buddy system. And with that, that also empowers the person who is teaching them, because, you know, they may not have that opportunity to be a leader, but in your classroom, they do. I also advocate for oral administration, extra time, the dictionary, and math manipulatives, because these are things that you may have to go to meetings and prove that that your student needs this help. So you have to be the advocate for those things. And then one thing that I like to do to kind of culminate their culture and for them to have, you know, to share their traditions, September the 15th through October the 15th is Hispanic Heritage Month, which starts on Friday. And so I like to display these posters outside of my door, because many of the people are from the same countries as our new arrival students. So whenever I put them up in my hallway, I will have this, and they are in Spanish. I will have students that they will read them while they're waiting in line at the bathroom, or they will read them while they're waiting to go into the classroom, and they start seeing the countries. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that so-and-so was from Colombia, just like me. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't know that so-and-so was from Guatemala, just like me. And so you're acknowledging their culture and their country while teaching them about what did that person do? How did, what was their story? And so just those little posters, the kids start asking questions and they want to read more about that person. So from this, we kind of do like a mini project where I will let the kids go to the library, find these people in the library, teaching them how to research people on the computer. So just by, exposing them to Hispanic Heritage Month, you can do so many activities, and it's a great way just to acknowledge their culture. And so these are just some photos of how our new arrival students have gotten involved, because that's another key piece of this program is the involvement. And so the first photo is, it was for Dr. Seuss Week. And so we were able to ask anybody from the community to come in. They could read a book to our students. Well, this is Dr. Hugo Ibarra, and he is the author of the book Sometimes. And so he came and he read his book to our students in Spanish, and they asked so many great questions. They wanted to know, what happened to this character, and did the person ever see their dad again? What happened to the dad? And so he encouraged them to rewrite the ending, for them to write, so you write that part. What did happen to the dad? And so I still have those, and I'm going to be sending Dr. Ibarra their writing samples, because it was amazing. It was a great experience for them to see somebody who looks like them, who sounds like them. Dr. Ibarra is from Puebla, Mexico, so he's from a different country, just like them. He's an immigrant, just like them. So making those connections is huge for our new arrival students. And then the bottom picture, we in Bryan ISD have something called UIL competitions. And so we encourage our students to get involved. And so the 3 students at the bottom were involved in oral reading for 4th grade Spanish, and they practiced every single day with our amazing librarian, Mrs. Estrada, and they won. In the whole district for Bryan ISD, they won 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place. And then the middle picture is our students. We encourage our students to participate in Fiestas Patrias, which is a celebration we have here in Bryan, Texas, to kind of celebrate, Mexico's independence and just the culture. And then the other photos are just programs that we have here at Jones. The top one is a Christmas musical that our new arrival students got to participate and sing and dance in. And the bottom one is when we celebrated Cinco de Mayo. So all of this is just, just an overall reminder of, encourage your new arrival students to participate. Encourage them to bring their clothes from other countries, to show off their pride, to their culture, their traditions. And now we are on our question and answer.
Okay, Yvette, the first one. How do you recommend the best way is to work with a partner teacher? Like what would it look like to distribute? To when do you come together and discuss challenge, if you're fortunate enough to have that?
Yeah, so I have an amazing, incredible partner teacher, Atair Mosqueda. She is the math and science component, and I do the NAC instruction, reading and writing. And so Ms. Mosqueda and I, we started working together year 2 of NAC. And so we did a lot of, talking to one another. We had to come up with a common system for our rules, routines, and procedures, because that was very important for our students to see that we were a united front. So her and I had to figure out, okay, what rules do you want in your classroom? What procedures are you going to have in your classroom? What routines are you going to have in your classroom? Now, they don't have to be the same by any means, but the consistency. Our new arrival students thrive on consistency. So her and I, made compromises, and we taught our kids, together the first few years, this is how we will sharpen pencils. This is how we will put away our backpacks. This is how you turn in your homework. And especially with lining up and the hallway and the restroom and the cafeteria, we do it together. We model together. We are doing all of this together our first week or week and a half of school. But that does take time. It takes time because you have to meet with that person after school. And then her and I will either talk before school or after school if there's something major that happened, if there's any concerns that we're seeing, if parents are writing her or writing me, we always communicate about the parents, because some parents will message her but not me, or some parents will message me and not her. So we have to communicate, and we have to set aside time every day to get that out. Sometimes it's a text message to her like, oh, so-and-so messaged me and I forgot, or we forward the message. So it's a lot of open communication between you and your partner.
Okay, yes, makes sense. And then another question is, our brains tend to be wired for negativity. And so sometimes we just see the deficits of how much further we have to go. I don't know that I could help this child reach a full year of academic success, develop their proficiency adequately in language. So what do you do on a personal level to not get bogged down by the negativity, but be able to see the progress and have gratitude and focus on that as well?
Wow, that is an amazing question. I love that question. So I am extremely hard on myself. I am my toughest critic. And as I was seeing, test results, I was going home crying. I was carrying that on my shoulders. It was affecting my health, but I talked to my tribe. I relied heavily on my tribe, and them allowing me to vent, them allowing me to share what was on my heart helped, for number one. Number two, focusing on the strengths. Your child, the student may never, be able to pass a test, but speaking with them, showing them the progress, and you analyzing your data and seeing, okay, the first time you took this test, you made an 8. The second time you took this test, you made a 15. And so acknowledging the small moments, the growth that they are making, even if it's letter sounds, today you learned 4 sounds. Yesterday you only learned 2 sounds. So one, giving yourself grace, and I know that is easier said than done, giving yourself grace, looking at every single moment of growth and celebrating it for yourself, celebrating it with the child. One student that I shared for session 1, student M, he was the last student that was in the presentation last year. He couldn't read, he couldn't write his name, and he did not pass the STAR test, but he made huge growth in his reading, in his scores. His MAP score showed. And so at the end of the year, when I talked to him and I showed him how much growth he made, he started crying because he couldn't believe, I came in, I didn't even know how to write my name, and now I'm able to read by myself, still working on fluency, but he was able to read. he's able to read. And so this year, my focus with him is going to be his handwriting, because the writing is still a huge struggle for him. And so that's something that, you know, I have to keep working with him, but building him up. And so not only just focusing on the academic, but also on the social emotional aspect, because this child, he's the one that his mom tells him that he's dumb and he's stupid. And so this year he's part of our news crew for Jones. And today was his first day, and we celebrated him. When he came back, we were clapping for him. We gave him hugs. He was just I'm sorry. He was just really, really excited, and just building them up, celebrating anything that they can do. You know, you didn't get lost today. You were able to log into the computer today. You were able to turn on the computer today. You know, just celebrating all of those small wins, and trying to tell them it's okay. It's okay that you don't know how to read yet. It's okay that you don't know how to write your name yet, but it's coming.
Yeah, what a beautiful testament. And that points to the beautiful work that you do as a human architect on the ground, because it's not just about the cognitive and the academic, it's building the whole person and equipping them with evidence of success and that growth mindset so that they can continue to confront the world and be resilient year after year. So a very special thank you, Yvette, for the work that you are doing. You are representing all the teachers that are here in this room and all of those that signed up for the webinar and will be watching the recording. And so we at Human Architects want to say an immense thank you to all of you for this work, because it does take everything from you. You need to be present fully in terms of your emotional state, your mental state, all of physical state, all of those things to do this work. And sometimes you don't see the immediate thank you or the immediate growth from the students. And you just have to trust the process that as you are investing and showing up as yourself, that is making an impact. So again, thank you so much for gifting your time, your experience, and your knowledge to others. And one last thing, could you share what you're giving to everyone that we're going to be sending by email? And I could actually drop it in the chat box as well. What are the contents? People, I kind of gave them a little cue about that.
Yes, so my gift for you is I am going to share via Google Folder my Spanish resources for struggling students, because I just wanted to say thank you guys for just giving me your time and your attention and your amazing questions. And I wanted you to leave with something. So I am giving you access to my Google Drive, if I can pull it up.
And I've dropped it in the chat box, yes.
Thank you so much. So these are the top 25 resources that I use on where do you begin? You know, how do you begin with students that don't know how to read or write? And so this is the resource that I love to send home and use, because these little cards, here we go. It was in my first couple of slides, has the letter, it has the photo, and then it has the syllables. So that's just one example. I have my Spanish fluency. Here it's the resource that I was talking about, where it's very simple as far as the syllables, and it goes all the way through to them actually reading. So those are just a few resources. And so all of you guys who registered for these sessions, you will have access to my folder.
Yeah, so I'll send out the recording in conjunction with the resources as well for everyone. And in a moment, we are going to ask you the same question twice. You could give it to us now and also think about it and answer in the survey. But you will have a survey at the end, and that is going to come by email. And we'll be asking you, what other types of training would you like to see offered? And so if you could please put that in the chat box as we're wrapping up right now, what other types of training would be beneficial to you, kind of in this style, you know, bringing in an expert and somebody who has that background and experience of the topic at hand. And feel free to drop that in. You could also present it in the survey. In addition, we are going to ask for what is your commitment and your takeaway. So hopefully anytime that we learn and we experience something new, if we have that learner's mindset, that openness, that lifelong learner in us, what are we going to change? Even if it's a small thing, it could be cognitive, affective, or behavioral, but what are you going to do differently after having participated in the 3 NAC series to date? And we would love for you to share that with us in the chat box of what does that look like and inspirations for others as well. And so I'm asking you to multitask there and be able to share some of those things as we wrap up. Please know that we at Human Architects are here to be of support, and school districts call us for 3 reasons. One, when they want to support their teachers to not burn out, to build resilience, so have that personal efficacy and build capacity. And we do that through a very high touch model, which is group coaching, because that creates community, it builds networks. It's a very intensive support that works. Second, school districts call us when they want to build professional capacity in teachers. And so helping them, equip them with skill sets to navigate challenges like this. How do you look at problems in a systematic way? How do you draw forth from what you know, your tacit experience, your knowledge base, all of those things to solve difficult academic problems in the classroom? And again, high touch model, group coaching is our preference because of that, because of the tight knit community, being able to micro deliver learning over a period of time. And lastly, school districts call us when they want to have a high performing campus leadership team that is able to articulate their vision, their strategy for how do we support our EB and ELs and those teachers that support the EB and ELs. Instead of having platitudes, what does it look like? And not only that, but how do we as a team develop cohesiveness, clarity of vision, eliminate dysfunction, and all of those things so that we can focus on top academic performance, cognitive, affective, and behavioral for everyone on our campus. And so if that sounds like something that is of interest, please reach out to us. Robbie's contact information's there. I'm easy to find online, and we can have a conversation about what those supports look like for you. So Robbie, do you want to wrap it up for us?
Well, I just want to reiterate that how thankful we are that everyone has joined us, those that are joining us via the recording or live with us. Those of you that are live with us, we thank you for your interaction and engagement through the chat. And we just wish you the very best and hope that this has been helpful for you as you move through this school year and working with your students. And again, just huge kudos to Yvette for being so vulnerable and putting yourself out there to so many people. We're very, very thankful for the gift that you are to public education, and for all of you that serve our students. We're very, very thankful for you. So thanks again, and have a wonderful evening.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you
Stay in
so
touch. Go ahead, Yvette.
Yes, please stay in touch.
Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and your attention. And thank you so much, Dr. Walichowski and Robbie Harvey, for allowing me this platform. It has been amazing to talk about the New Arrival Center, and I hope to see more programs started in Texas. So please keep in touch and let me know, what is going on in your district.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. I
Thank you.
hope you see the chat, Yvette. There's lots of notes coming in. So thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Yes.
I'm gonna just leave it on for just a second so
Yes.
that people want to finish typing.